In this short video, I want to address the challenge we face in terms of paying for our retirement and ask the question, how can a self-invested personal pension help? So first of all, the challenge. When we get to the point where we can no longer earn money, we want to retire, who's going to pay for it? Well, there are several possible answers. There's the state, but the state pension isn't very much per week for most people, and who knows whether it'll even exist when some of us get to retirement. Your children might help, but frankly, the way property prices are going at the moment, there's a good chance they'll be living with you and still dependent on you in some cases, rather than helping you out. So I'm not sure that is a reliable source necessarily of retirement income. And your employer, well, if you're fortunate enough to work for the state or one of the few companies that still offers a final salary or defined benefit pension, maybe. But for most of us, the challenge is to build our own pension fund. Most of us are in defined contribution or what's called money purchase plans. That means we've got to do the hard work and hope we've got a big enough lump sum to cover our retirement needs. Now, how big does that lump sum need to be? Well, here's a flavour for the challenge. What does £100,000 buy, let's say, a 60-year-old man at current annuity rates? Well, leaving out a few details, if they don't want inflation proofing, maybe £5,500 per year, and if they do, maybe £3,500 per year. So not very much. It's a fairly scary equation. So the earlier you start, and the more you let compounding work for you, and the more help you get in terms of tax breaks, which is where self-invested personal pensions come in, and the wiser your investment choices, the better. So, how can a self-invested personal pension help? Well, first of all, some good news. You can contribute, your employer can contribute. Typically, that's a percentage of your salary every month, and then the government top that up. So if you're a basic rate taxpayer, every 80p that goes in can become £1 invested. All right, thanks to the government's tax relief. If you're a higher rate taxpayer and you set yourself up correctly, every 60p that comes in can become £1. So for higher rate taxpayers, the tax benefit on the way in is quite significant. That's quite a significant kicker on the way in. A tax-free lump sum on retirement, so at the other end, on the way out, when you get to the point where you think, well, I've got my lump sum ready to go, you can withdraw under current rules up to 25% of that pot out and do with it as you will. And we'll look at some of the options as far as the remaining 75% is concerned in just a moment. Flexible investment choice. Self-invested personal pensions give you a wide range of things to invest in as you're accumulating your retirement fund pre to retirement. And that's pretty important. So you've got a wide range of stocks and shares and bonds and so on. And what you're aiming to do is grow as big a fund as you can prior to the point where you need it. The earlier you start, the bigger that pot will be. Let's take a look at that now. So, making your money work for you. Now, we'll make a few assumptions. First of all, I'm going to assume that you are prepared to set aside, let's say, £200 a month from your own money. That could come from your employer as well, so a mixture of contributions. And tax relief takes that up to £250 per month, and we're going to do this for 40 years. All right, so we're going to have a good crack at generating a decent retirement pot. Now, what you don't know is what rates of return you'll get over that 40-year period. So let's assume some. Not guaranteed by any means. Let's go for a relatively conservative one, a sort of average one of 5%, so 3%, 5%, and a sort of more aggressive one at 10%. Will you get these rates? I certainly can't guarantee that. It depends on what you invest in and how the market performs and so on. But let's see what that would do. So how much could the pot be worth? Well, at 3%, not bad, 230 odd £1,000. That's a conservative rate of growth, remember. At 5%, you're heading up towards more like £380,000, and at 10%, okay, a whopping, well, best part of 1.4 million. Okay, now your problem, nice problem to have, some would say, is if you generated a pot of that kind of size, unfortunately, you'd have breached what's called the lifetime allowance limit, currently set for the tax year 2014-15 at 1.25 million. So the bit above that red line could be subject to a fairly hefty sort of penal tax charge. All right, but nonetheless, the point I'm trying to make here is not so much about that, that's for future videos, it's more about the power potentially of compounding over a decent length of time. So in a nutshell, the more you put in, the longer you let it work for you, and obviously the greater the growth rate you achieve, the better the pot will be when it comes to retirement. Okay, so let's now address a few useful pointers on self-invested personal pensions. You can run one alongside an existing pension. Some people think, oh, well, I can't open a SIPP, I've already got a pension, but it doesn't matter. You may have an existing arrangement with an employer or a personal pension, that's fine. You can still potentially qualify to open a self-invested personal pension. You can invest quite a bit into these things. All right, the amount that can go in is significantly higher than, for example, ISAs, another tax-efficient way of saving. So slightly grand phrase, 100% of net relevant earnings. For this video, I'll just summarise that as you can contribute what you earn subject to a limit for the current tax year, that's 2014-2015, 6th of April to 5th of April, of 40,000. But nonetheless, that's a pretty decent amount that could be contributed. And remember, tax relief on the way in will bump what you contribute up, okay? Minimum age to access your funds is 55. Now this is a moving feast. The government has this under review. It may move up to say 57 in the future, but at the moment you can start to basically draw off the benefits from the lump sum you've accumulated from 55. You don't necessarily have to at 55, but you can at 55. And you've got a few choices. So when you get to the other end, when you get to retirement, you've got your lump sum pot. You think, what do I do? Well, essentially 25% of it can be taken straight away as a tax-free lump sum. That leaves 75%. Just to highlight the three basic choices there, very small pots, once you get to age 60 or beyond, can actually be taken as a lump sum, subject to a marginal rate of income tax. That's for people who've got little pots from previous employment. For the rest of us who've got a sort of more decent pot, if you like, there is the ability, subject to what other pension income you have, to draw down amounts. All right, unfortunately, you need quite a sizable other pension income before you can just draw amounts off the remaining lump sum. However, you may be able to leave the lump sum invested and take income from it, subject to a limit on the amount you can draw off. Okay, and finally, you've got conversion into an annuity. That's handing over the remaining 75% and shopping around. That's vital to get the best income stream that you can get in retirement. And remember, we're going to be retired quite a long time potentially. I mean, someone who's 40 today could easily expect to live into their 90s. So you need to be quite careful and conscientious about what decision you take with that lump sum when you get to retirement. More about that in future videos. Now, leave you one final thought. You can open a pension for a child. Now, let's be honest, you need to sort yourself out first. Put your own life jacket on first, if you like. Get your own pension arrangements sorted so you're not a burden on your own children in retirement. Then beyond that, some people might think about setting up a pension for their children. And the SIPP rules do allow for this. And let's see, just a final thought, how effective that could be. Just going to say, you have chosen to invest £3,600 once on behalf of a child. You're going to let it grow and we'll assume a growth rate of 6%, okay, for 65 years. So it goes in and then you just sort of forget about it. What could that be worth after 65 years? And the answer is a fairly impressive 150,000, just reiterating the power of compounding, assuming you get the growth rate that you want. So there it is. The challenge we all face in retirement is a fairly big one, but I'm suggesting that self-invested personal pensions, for those of us who've got to build our own pension pot, can be a very useful tool in terms of making sure we get there.